Hello. I am back with Dr. Darmal by popular demand. I did a couple of live chats with you a while back, and they did so well, I wanted to have you back on. For those of you who do not know who Dr. Darmal is, you have a very impressive bio. I'm going to quickly just say he is one of our experts here at Amen Clinics. You practice adult, child, and adolescent psychiatry, correct? Yes. How long have you been with us now?
12 years.
12 years. So he knows what he's doing very much so. I don't know why you didn't stay in Hawaii, but I'm glad you didn't. So you were in Hawaii for a long time.
Another 12 years there.
Practicing there, right. So
yes, I was teaching at the medical school and training residents and child fellows.
Fantastic. So I love that you're coming back and talking about this today, because I think it is something most of us don't understand and don't really know what's going on. And if we can, it helps us with our kids. We're going to talk about what's going on in your kid's brain, in your adolescent's brain, specifically adolescence, because a lot is changing at that time, right?
Yeah.
So we want to talk about what's happening and what can go wrong. We're going to end up doing this in 3 segments, but we want to talk about what's happening, what can go wrong, and what you can do about it overall, correct? And then we've got some little subtopics in here.
Sure.
So what's going on in your kid's brain?
Yeah, so a lot of studies show that the brain development from a childhood into adult happens to this phase of transition, which is called adolescence. And adolescence, you can say that from age 10 to 24 is the process of the adolescent development.
So right there, you've got people confused, because we all think, oh, at 18, we're kicking them out of the house.
Yeah, so no, adolescence usually starts around age 10, just pre-puberty stage, and then continues
past 18.
Past 18, up until age 24, 25.
And that's an important point, because we think that people should be making adult decisions like you're 18 now. But that's not necessarily what's going on. Okay.
Yeah. So especially the frontal cortex, which is the executive functioning of the brain, does not develop until, age 24, 25. Although the development is much slower after age 18, 19, but it continues to grow up until age 24, 25. Okay. So this is a very rapid transition in the brain. The brain circuitry changes. The brain goes through this kind of changes in 2 phases. One is right after birth, and then the second phase of very rapid neuroregeneration happens around age 10, 11, 12, 13.
Now, I had heard this term pruning. Is that when that happens?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the pruning, the dendrite formation, the axon formation, and the myelination.
So all that's happening at the same time?
All of those happens. Basically, the myelination is what matures the brain.
So if we back that up for 1 second and break it down, pruning is where your brain starts to disconnect whatever you're not using. Is that right?
Absolutely.
So any of those connections that you're not using.
What's not used.
So that it can focus more on, you can be more specialized in what it needs, right? Yes. So that's pruning. Myelination is how you make your nerve impulses go faster?
So the brain circuits or the brain neurons, they need to be covered by a sheet. Mm-hmm. This is like an insulation kind
almost
of
like a coax over.
Yeah, like a coax.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is very important. That's how the brain matures. And if this myelination doesn't happen the right way, it causes a lot of circuitry problems where certain parts of the brain will be firing on its own, or we kind of see a disruption in the brain activity.
That makes sense. It reminds me, this is a silly analogy, but it kind of reminds me of this. So I have this cat that loves to chew on cords. It drives me crazy. We have gone through hundreds of dollars in computer cords. He's obsessed with chewing on the rubber on the cords. But when he does it, he gets to the part of the cord where it's the actual wiring, and all of a sudden I go to touch it and it like shocks me, or my computer won't charge my computer. So it's almost like that rubber cover is like myelination. It's protecting the circuitry, right? Yeah. So it's similar to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So myelination and synapse formation, that's another phase of the brain development that happens. And usually the development happens from the back. So the brain develops or matures from the back going to the front.
And you kind of wish it would do it the other way, right?
Usually you would thought,
You wish they would get
you would want
forethought
the
first.
executive function to grow first. But the executive part or the frontal cortex of the brain,
I love this. Okay.
this is the part that basically involved in impulsivity, focus, attentions, cognitive ability,
Sort of judgment.
the braking mechanism,
Yeah.
judgment, even emotional control. They all happen here. So this is one area that grows at the end, and that's why we see a lot of impulsivity, kind of a reckless behavior, risk-taking behavior, and the ability to the perception of danger or risk becomes very problematic during the adolescence.
That's so interesting.
So this is one area that needs to grow. And the other area that grows is the deep limbic system. So the deep limbic system are the deep structures. This is the area that also grows. And both of these areas are affected by the estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. All of these hormones have an impact on it.
And they're surging at this time. So
Yes,
if hormones are affecting this area and hormones are surging at this time, you can start to see why we see a difference in teens' behavior.
Absolutely. And that's why we see that as in the estrogen and progesterone can cause an early maturation. And that's why female or girls, they in certain areas mature sooner than the male, so the boys. So if you compare a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old girl
Right.
compared to a 12, 13-year-old boy, from a maturation point of view, the female are more matured. And that's because estrogen and progesterone, they have more of a maturation effect on the limbic system.
Now, you bring up a good point, though, because I had read this and I don't know if it's true, and I'm curious. So girls start getting the surge of estrogen, progesterone. It's not really regulated yet at that age, if I remember this correctly. And because of those surges, and it's cyclical. So aren't girls more prone to depression?
More prone to mood disorders.
Okay, interesting.
So they develop more mood disorders.
So not depression specifically.
Yeah, it could be any type of a mood disorder.
So
whether it's
anxiety.
depression, a lot of anxiety. They become more moody. And so the two different hormones have a different effect on the brain. Estrogen is an upper. So it's a stimulant. It basically gives you a sense of well-being. It affects the dopamine level. You feel much more kind of energetic, more positive, and more, goal-directed.
Right.
Progesterone, on the contrary, has more of a downing effect.
So Valium.
So yeah, and that's why you get a lot of PMS. And because the brain is so young and not well developed, we see this kind of fluctuation in mood and anxiety.
And when boys start getting the surge of testosterone, their drive goes up, but they don't have forethought.
Yes, they become more aggressive,
Right.
they become more impulsive. And so the testosterone have a different impact on the neurocircuitry, or it's more kind of a causes impulsive behavior.
Okay, interesting. That's so interesting. So I love this. So I want to talk more about this. I want to break this into 3 sessions if we can.
Sure.
In the next one, we'll talk about, we've talked about what is happening. If we can talk about what can go wrong, types of genetic, environmental, and sort of hormonal changes. We talked a little bit about the hormonal changes. Yes. But if we can focus on things in the environment or your genes, and also like when things start to go wrong, we'll talk about that next.
Yeah.